a do-it-yourself instructional video about tools, materials and technique if you want to learn to write in Bach's handwriting. What ink will you use? Which pen and paper? What sources do you use? What knowledge do I need? And why would you start with this? We already have good scores. We have to choose a piece. The Mass in B minor is too ambitious for a start. We therefore prefer a short piece. For example, this chorale prelude, 10 bars on a double staff divided over 3 lines. The semi-transparent brown ink is easy to read for a wealth of information. Dark note heads record dip frequency. We see the ink reservoir steadily emptying. After a new dip, the vibe of note changes, slightly more firm. This sequence, although a pleasure to see, is not mandatory. Changing the order can have benefits, like equalizing stem distances and avoiding crossings. Bach alternated black and brown inks without distinction. We prefer Bister at the start, because the variety of shades also documents some of the writing speed. Bach said, "Anyone who works as hard as I do will succeed as I do." And about the skill needed to play an instrument, there is nothing remarkable about it. All one has to do is hit the right keys at the right time, and the instrument plays itself. To repair staff lines, we keep the quill at 180 degrees. For note stems, we keep the tip steady at 90 degrees. The vertical becomes a thin line. Horizontal beams become thick. Most lettering is done at 45. That's about it. The base you need to know. We can find the composition in a small notebook. It was calligraphed by Joanne. History books are silent about her, but her handwriting is identical to that of the more famous composer Johann Sebastian Bach. They even had the same titles, an example of one of the many conundrums surrounding the study of calligraphy. We have to prepare a quill. Barbs are stripped with a sharp knife. Goose and crow will do, but we love the Ferrari under the quills, swan feathers. I collect them in nature from June to September. Because of bird flu, I clean them carefully. Thin skin is scraped off the shaft. Then I leave them in water overnight. Next day I heat sand at 180 degrees for 20 minutes. This hardens the pen. If you leave a feather laying around for years, you will achieve the same result. There is marrow in the shaft. You can leave it there to increase the volume of the ink reservoir. However, it tends to break down unpredictably, leaving an unwanted ink stain. Watch springs were used as replacements. We can cut a piece of tin. Roll it up and let it bend to the point in an arc. It leads to more surface area to provide for a longer, steady ink flow. We have doubled the power. We cut the shaft at an angle in 2 movements. In this case, the point split along a natural fault line, a lucky shot. Pen knives had a round side that you use in a rotation motion to make 2 beautiful and sturdy arcs. The tip is also cut at a slight angle, after which the sides are then neatly trimmed. It initially took me an hour to cut a feather properly. Have confidence that it will be easy in the end. After a short test, the quill is ready again for a new lift-off. The precise order of the steps does not matter much. The result is what counts. When splitting the point, try not to cut it, but to let it crack while it makes a sound. In case you didn't, just pretend you did. Fonts come in two types, one that we can't read and one we can. The title reads, Ach, wie nichtig, ach, wie flüchtig, which translates as, Oh, how futile, oh, how volatile. Chorale lyrics were usually written in German Kurrent. Chorale titles were written in Italic. In this sweet little booklet, Joanne makes a hybrid of the two fonts. She does so randomly, creative by nature as she is. For disentangling shapes and styles and getting a grip, we need a strategy. We are going to look around a bit and find other examples. Oh, how is ach wie written? Let's start with three capitals from the cover. O, W, D. The first thing we do is make a copy of what we see. The site of the Bach Museum in Leipzig has a template of the Kurrent. Joanne's capital O differs significantly. Its first two strokes correspond to those of the capital D of the Italic. We enter a glimpse and catch a change in Joanne's mind from Italic das Orgel-Büchlein to Kurrent Orgel-Büchlein. Famous Johann loved Joanne. He not only wrote a heartfelt passion for her, but honored her too by composing a cantata as a spin-off of the choral prelude. He added a little personal touch on second thought by switching up the last word of the phrases. We can now compare the unfamiliar capital letter A in a different setting. Johann used the Italic capital A in the lyrics. The cursive Kurrent is not suited for speed, so we can understand the inconsistency. Common letter combinations had a specific distinctive shape. Designed for hurry, at first glance we can experience them as losing some form. Cantata parts were copied by supercopyist Johanna Andrea Kuhnau, Anna Magdalena, Johanne himself and two unknown writers. There are rules and prescribed forms, but the whole exudes freedom and playful application. The chorale team triggered Joanne to use the Kurrent in the titles. When a Latin expression passes by, Alio modo, in another way, the font changes. In summary, choice of fonts depends on function and language. There is a degree of playful freedom of form, and Kurrent and Italic alphabets are helpful in getting a grip on the shapes. We talked about choosing ink, cutting a quill, the angle at which to hold it, and typefaces. We still have a few more topics to cover, such as how to create staff lines, layout, and how to deal with mistakes. For the staff lines, we need a special tool, a rastrum. There are two types available, one that we can't work with and one that works. I recommend the one that works. Funny lettering is their side gift, besides being a valuable exercise in controlling angles. When handling the quill, we use very little pressure. If 5-point metal pens existed, why did they actually use a bird feather for a single-point pen? A quill may seem primitive, but as a writing tool, it is far superior to any modern pen. Its tactile delight and elastic strength translates in particular fine-tuned expressionism. The alloy used to make rastra was too weak to serve as a single nib. There was no alternative for the staff lines, and its weakness shows. So there is good reason to recommend the anachronistic modern version, gliding smoothly as a Ferrari. Just as it takes practice to produce a beautiful tone with a musical instrument, it takes a while before you achieve an even ink distribution with a rastrum. I use a page as a visual reference to guide more or less straight lines. Joanne did this completely freehand, and we can see that this was difficult to maintain, especially for the last quarter of the stave. The appearance is also governed by another irregularity: the spacing between the 5 rastrum nibs. It is a marker to connect scores in time and place, cities and writing desks. But this historical gold can be at odds with the aimed aesthetics of a modern copy. Quite a few pages in the booklet contain only a title and empty staff lines. They are all done with the same light ink and carved feather. Pages with music notation therefore show a pretty tone-on-tone for the ink colors and a distinctive quill nib for letters and musical notes. It explains why the first capital A does not have the same dark brown shade as some notes. When positioning text blocks, Joanne is generous and optimistic for left and top margins. Too much, in fact, surname and proudly acquired titles painfully crash into under and right margin. The same mechanism is at work in music notation. The density of distances follow this flow again and again. In the closing measure we see a broadening, which we could read expressively as a slight slowing of tempo, while the calligraphic reason may be to fill the entire line. We need a well-thought-out decision model to make choices. Properties of the Bach seal can be helpful in this regard. The design is derived from existing seals, such as this one from August Pfeiffer. Such wickerwork bedazzles the eyes with its overwhelming complex structure. The building blocks are more simple, and mirror symmetry and parallelism are the organizing principle. Two-part proportionality is the basis for further 2- and 3-way divisions. We easily experience those proportions on an emotional level. We experience that we are halfway here through the dramatic tension from the low tonic to the highest note. We can use visual proportionality and layout to underline such architecture when we make a new copy. This decision framework is also useful for choosing the number of staff lines and bar totals per line. Calligraphy, guiding analysis and serving interpretation. The new layout of the choral prelude pays tribute to symmetry and 2- and 3-part blocks. The possibilities are endless. There is no single solution. The modern monogram in the midst was made in Adobe Illustrator and Photoshop. The oil-painted monogram on an iron chest was commissioned by Bach. The decorative glass was a gift to him from the Krebs brothers, who calligraphed many of his scores under his care. The versions differ considerably, in details but also in broad terms. The same applies to the choral prelude and copies thereof. This adorable 1775 copy is one of very many, proving Joanne was not forgotten in the second half of the 18th century. The 1983 Neue Bach-Ausgabe separates the pedal part on a third staff. Soprano and alto share the upper one, and there is a restless variation in the width of the bars. The black and white contrast may be more to your taste. History does not limit you in this regard. Bach occasionally did use bleached paper. This is soot-based ink. If you exchange that for a good quality gouache, you have added a new Ferrari to your fleet. The angularity and linearity of this layout is a result of the technique used. Ruler, chisel and hammer provide rigidity in a carefully measured out grid. It is ironic that the strict preference for a rectangular music block is the cause of a wobbly layout. The energetic liveliness in the autograph is largely due to the flow of the thick beams. Connecting series of these function as phrasings and explications of interwoven voices. Master musicians turn for this reason to the autographs, and capturing those inspirational brooks is our most important task. We still have a few things to discuss. what to look for with paper, the scale at which you work, but first let's look at mistakes. Join me in Bach's bestiarium of calligraphic solutions. These buzzing bees seems to wonder to be or not to be. Their ink was already dry, so a circling motion was chosen to not be. For wet ink, smear ghosting was a favorite. Some scores are swarmed by smacked inked insects. Here the lyrics specifies, I look forward to my death. Ink sacs can be accompanied by species designation in lettering, C to not be. A cute little inking flapjack octopussy moves on ocean waves, free from the grid of bar and staff lines. The waves seem to betray the mood of the moment. It could be changeable. Graceful curls suggest a certain cheerful acceptance. But the waves could get bigger and more aggressive. The simple, straight line deletion could manifest itself in many ways. Thoughtful patchwork registers more contemplative minutes. These sheets by his supercopyist Johanna Andrea Kuhnau might be a clue that today is not a good day for making silly jokes. So far, all tactics embrace a paradoxical existence. They be to not be. It feels like a crime scene littered with hair and fingerprints. Smart copyist Berendina Christina Kaiser invented correction fluid. Scratching where it itches was also an option. That's actually never a good idea. Here it led to a hole in the paper. Of course, we do it anyway. A round bottle supports precision. The long fibers in the paper do not cooperate. You could try cutting and scraping with a razor blade. This folio of Anna Magdalena contains a remarkable series of events. It started with cutting out a wrong note. As he continued, her mind started to wander. Daydreaming and working on autopilot, she began to copy even more literally than usual. She starts to copy the fingering from her example, which was written down during a keyboard lesson, a very rare find. With her head in the clouds, things go wrong when she moves to the top staff. Now she was in serious trouble. She handled it skillfully and with the most loving care. Delicately she dripped small drops of water onto the wrong note heads. The gum arabic of the black Bister ink began to dissolve. Bister and not soot, the ghost notes are brown. The stains were neatly blotted up. Rewritten parts suffered somewhat from the still damp paper. She may be not mother's prettiest, but what a she to love. If you are more interested in cutting and pasting work, you can also go ahead with a historically responsible approach. Note that his scissors and knives are always razor sharp. The amount of detail can be overwhelming, but train yourself to notice notable details, like here a very characteristic rastrum. Despite the calligraphic beauty inherent of insects, I opted here for covering it up. Such patchwork has its own charm and tends to fade completely into the background. Having the patience to wait for the glue to dry is the hardest part. Otherwise the ink will run, as was the case with Anna Magdalena. The top staff is written in a soprano clef. The notebook for Willem Friedemann begins with a folio with neatly written out clefs. The choice of the soprano clef has to do with tradition. The vocal range falls considerably outside the regular staff lines. Instrumental music notated with this clef took up ample space between the grand staff. We see a shift in clef preference in these preludes, the first from 1722, the second 2 decades later. The combination of soprano and bass clef created idiosyncratic transitions in the space between the staff lines. Modern habits also influence the subjective editorial choice to change the clef. An ambition to be editorially invisible is further undermined by modern accidentals rules. In the autograph, the accidental applies to only one note. The prelude is in the key of G minor, which was seen as a transposed Doric scale, hence the single accidental sign at the clef. We see melodic minor behavior. Our ears are tolerant of both that scale and Doric twists. Misunderstandings are prevented by accidentals who are redundant according to the rules. Forgotten accidentals complicate the issue. Checking for omissions and for sneaked-in silent modern corrections conforming to a more familiar melodic scale mold can be a confusing job. Flats, naturals and sharps are tiny symbols, and the tip of the nib is used to create thin lines. A featherweight positioning we didn't talk about before. Joanne was a grandmaster in expressing clearly in very little space. She achieved this partly by making lines coincide as little as possible. In scores where boundaries are pushed, it are the stamp distances and notehead sizes that shrink. Printing digital scans at their real size is an exciting experience of its own. Size matters. The filigree work of the chorale prelude on an actual scale is too difficult to begin with. In any case, a new copy would likely look better with a little more spacing. We keep the rastrum width, but for the music we scale up. Alto and tenor move in a steady 16th flow. Bars could have the same width. Joanne did not work from a written sample, but composed from her head. She made a rough estimate of the space needed and continually adjusted it. If it didn't work out, she could resort to tablature in the wide bottom margin, or even add a separate extra sheet. We can plan and draft distances and proportions using a pencil and a ruler. We do this loosely for liveliness, but regular enough to suggest a steady beat, visually supporting musicianship. Angles of stamps show a cursive, that the ravishing energy is worth pursuing. Do not practice making arcs, but make straight lines. At pace, they will bend naturally. Technique is your friend. You don't need having good handwriting already. Many calligraphers don't write pretty in everyday life. Ambition and self-criticism can hinder development. Don't try to make an exact copy right away, but trust the learning process. Free yourself from an aim to impress. Pure pleasure will be your reward. We put our exercise away for a day. We now have a fresh look. Take good care of yourself. Switch from I failed because I made mistakes to I see what can be improved and I will. We can even experiment with different graphic solutions. It takes a while for the glue to dry, so we have some time to talk about paper. Properties that matter are weight, grain, color, dimensions. I recommend 200 grams hemp paper, coarse grain, unbleached and at least 25 by 35 centimeters. There is magic in using the same type of paper. The 400 paper mills in Bach region differ in their end product. This is an age without standardization. I think it is necessary to talk about black and white again. This fragment of a score by Johann Christoph Friedrich Bach serves as an example of his handwriting. An effort has been made to remove information such as the personal width of the left margin. As craftsmen, we see that the simplified opacity partly blocks reading how the quill was held. Noise and spots can be a clue to identification, such as Joanne's tobacco crumbs. This hair by Carl Philipp Emanuel is therefore indirectly important for the musical notation. Parts of this early version from 1733 of Bach's Latin Mass were mainly calligraphed by family members. The parts used tell about the line-up of the singers and instrumentalists. It was relatively small. 100 pages of the revised version from the late 1740s testify to casual, complete mastery of calligraphy. Emanuel was involved in several performances and new calligraphed copies after Sebastian's death. We are in the midst of Bach studies, but how do tobacco and black and white copies relate? Mass in B minor, folio 1, in autograph and critical edition. Bach starts with the words Jesu Juva, Jesus help. In the modern edition, this is spirited away. This visual ghosting makes the editor conceptually present. Bach's folio has 10 bars. The 1954 Neue Bach-Ausgabe has 4. In total, 300 pages for a conductor to leaf through. Friedrich Sment regarded the Mass as an incoherent historical misunderstanding and artistic blunder. This did not make him particularly receptive to close reading. While that is a real challenge with this autograph, sagging staff lines tell about old age. The quill was no longer so sharply cut and its holding is more wobbly. There are breathtaking, awesome, expressive calligraphic passages relying on 50 years of experience. But many pages suffer from aggressive iron gall ink. Emanuel owned this score for 40 years. Disentangling the hand of father and son is quite a task. It was clear that the 54 edition was up for revision. The 2010 edition stands out. Ink composition was precisely measured in 500 places to distinguish the hands. The music notation is modern in design, stripped in expression. Practical knowledge of calligraphy did not play a role. In fact, the reputation and image of the calligraphy craft in scholarly circles suffered at this time seriously from the nuts and unfounded theory that Bach's works were written by a woman, Anna Magdalena. If there is one thing we can learn from her, it is that it is possible to reproduce Jean Sebastian's expressive calligraphy style. Cum Sancto Spiritu. Using the same tools and materials and working in his spirit is far from a futile and volatile activity. We connect with real, physical, personal existence. The interaction between seeing and doing sharpens our powers of perception. We understand better what is noticeable. This extensively told background and context could be a doctrine for the choice of the type of paper. The digital black and white reduction of handwriting examples is symbolic of incomprehension. Modern, revised, original text versions take on the guise of 19th and 20th century rigid engraving and printing techniques, and the ambition to objectively record final versions for once and for all. But our awareness of the subjectivity of choices and love for the warm colors of the historical palette should not be a limitation. Bach's calligraphy style lends itself perfectly to super smooth paper and sharp black and white contrasts. Informed, conscious individuality and playfulness might be our hive. All our efforts and focus have led to a result. Talk about it and be precise in your descriptions. This will lead to unexpected breakthroughs and insights. You are now ready to harvest lessons learned and to redoing calligraphing the same piece. You will notice that you deal with the same questions a lot more skillfully. Don't repeat the same piece endlessly, for now you have gotten out of it what is in it for you. Move on to other pieces, such as this adagio composed by Bach. Many calligraphers throw away their practices. The learning curve is hostile to previous work. Learn to love all your steps. At the end of the line, you will find it is not perfection you were after, but expression. In addition, it is educational to redo a piece after a year and be able to compare. It will make you proud. I hope this 5-minute tutorial brings you a head start, but don't take my words for truth. This cute, innocent hobby catapults you to the core of Jean's art and personality. There are unknown unknowns to explore. Share your journey and your work. I sincerely look forward to your calligraphy.